The wind howled like a wounded beast as Madeline Jones clutched her soaked cloak tighter around her trembling shoulders. The storm had come out of nowhere, a violent temper tantrum from the heavens that had extinguished her only source of light and left her stranded in the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Wyoming territory in 1876. "Please," she whimpered, struggling to shield the lantern from the relentless rain. It was no use. The flame had died minutes ago, leaving her in complete darkness save for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the unfamiliar landscape in brief, terrifying glimpses. Madeline had never felt so utterly alone. 3 days ago, she had been safely ensconced in her comfortable life in Boston, surrounded by the trappings of civilization and security. Now she was lost in a storm, miles from the nearest town, with night falling rapidly. The tears came then, hot and desperate, mingling with the cold raindrops on her face. She hadn't heard the approach of hoofbeats over the roar of the storm. The first indication she had that she wasn't alone was the sudden appearance of a tall figure on horseback, materializing from the darkness like an apparition. "Madam?" The deep voice cut through the storm's fury. "You all right out here?" Madeline startled, nearly losing her footing on the muddy ground. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, approaching cautiously. Another lightning flash revealed a lean face beneath the wide brim of a cowboy hat, concerned eyes taking in her bedraggled state. "My lantern," she managed between sobs, holding up the useless item. "It went out, and I don't know where I am. I was trying to reach Willow Creek, but you're not lost anymore," the cowboy said firmly, his voice somehow both gentle and resolute. "I know these parts better than I know my own face. I'm Kyle Ironwood." "Madeline Jones," she replied automatically, the manners drilled into her by her strict upbringing asserting themselves even in this desperate situation. Kyle stepped closer, and Madeline could make out his features more clearly. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with weather-beaten skin that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "Miss Jones, you're a good 10 miles from Willow Creek, and this storm's only going to get worse. My ranch is just over that rise." He gestured to a barely visible hill. "I can offer you shelter for the night. It wouldn't be proper for you to stay unchaperoned, but my housekeeper, Mrs. Benson, lives in the main house. You'd be safe and dry." Madeline hesitated only briefly. The alternative was remaining in the storm, and her chances of survival seemed increasingly slim. "Thank you, Mr. Ironwood. I would be most grateful." Kyle nodded, turning to his horse and retrieving a thick woolen blanket from his saddlebag. "Wrap yourself in this. It's already wet, but it'll cut the wind." He draped it over her shoulders before leading his horse closer. "Can you ride?" "A little," Madeline admitted. "Though not well." "That's all right. You'll ride with me." With surprising gentleness, he helped her mount before swinging up behind her. His arms came around her as he took the reins, creating a warm cocoon that made her realize just how cold she'd become. "Hold tight," he instructed, and they set off through the tempest. The journey seemed both endless and mercifully brief. Madeline was acutely aware of the strong chest at her back, the steady heartbeat she could feel even through layers of wet clothing. There was something profoundly comforting about this stranger's presence, a solidity that made the howling chaos around them seem less threatening. Finally, lights appeared through the curtain of rain, the warm glow of lanterns from windows in a substantial log ranch house. As they drew closer, Madeline could make out a large barn and several outbuildings, the shadowy forms of cattle huddled in pens nearby. Kyle guided the horse to the covered porch and dismounted smoothly before reaching up to help her down. Madeline's legs nearly buckled when they touched the ground, partly from the long ride and partly from exhaustion. "Easy now," Kyle murmured, steadying her with a hand at her elbow. "Let's get you inside." The door opened before they reached it, revealing a plump, gray-haired woman with a concerned expression. "Heavens above, Kyle! What poor soul have you brought in from this terrible night?" "This is Miss Madeline Jones, Mrs. Benson. She was trying to reach Willow Creek when her lantern went out in the storm." "Miss Jones, this is Mrs. Benson, the finest housekeeper this side of the Mississippi. Mrs. Benson immediately took charge, ushering Madeline into the warm house while clucking sympathetically. "You poor dear, you're soaked to the bone. Let's get you out of these wet things before you catch your death." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined, with polished wooden floors, a massive stone fireplace, and furniture that, while sturdy and practical, showed evidence of careful craftsmanship. It wasn't what Madeline had expected from a bachelor cowboy's home. "Kyle, you're dripping all over my clean floor," Mrs. Benson scolded. "Go change while I tend to Miss Jones. And tell Thomas to bring in some hot water for a bath." Kyle touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Yes, madam." To Madeline, he added, "You're in good hands now. Mrs. Benson will take care of you." As he disappeared down a hallway, Mrs. Benson guided Madeline toward the stairs. "Come along, dear. We need to get you warm and dry. Are you hungry? Of course you are. I'll bring you something to eat once you're settled." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Madeline found herself installed in a comfortable bedroom, provided with a hot bath that restored feeling to her numbed limbs, and given a clean nightgown and robe that Mrs. Benson explained belonged to Kyle's sister when she visits. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, her wet clothes had been taken away to be laundered, and a tray with steaming soup, fresh bread, and hot tea awaited her on a small table near the fire that had been lit in the bedroom's small fireplace. "Eat up, dear," Mrs. Benson instructed. "Then straight to bed with you. We can talk more in the morning when you've had some rest." Too exhausted to argue, Madeline complied, savoring the simple but delicious food. By the time she crawled between the clean sheets, she was already half asleep, the horror of being lost in the storm beginning to fade into a bad dream. Morning brought watery sunshine and the distant sound of activity from outside. Madeline woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous night came flooding back. A quick glance around the room revealed her clothes, now clean and dry, folded neatly on a chair. After dressing, she made her way downstairs, following the enticing aroma of coffee and something baking. She found Mrs. Benson in the kitchen, her capable hands kneading dough. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her warmly. "Did you sleep well? You look much better today." "I did, thank you," Madeline replied. "And thank you for your kindness last night. I don't know what would have happened if Mr. Ironwood hadn't found me." Mrs. Benson shook her head. "God works in mysterious ways. Kyle wasn't even supposed to be out in that direction last night, but one of the young calves went missing, and he was searching for it." She gestured toward the table. "Sit down and have some breakfast. Kyle's been up since dawn, but he should be in shortly." As if summoned by his name, the door opened, and Kyle entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. Seeing him in daylight, Madeline was struck by how handsome he was, tall and lean, with intelligent blue eyes and brown hair lightened by the sun to the color of wheat. His face broke into a smile when he saw her. "Miss Jones. Good to see you up and about. How are you feeling this morning?" "Much better, thanks to you and Mrs. Benson," Madeline replied, suddenly self-conscious. "I can't thank you enough for your help last night." Kyle waved away her thanks as he washed his hands at the basin near the door. "Anyone would have done the same. Though I admit I'm curious what brings a Boston lady all the way to Wyoming territory alone." Madeline blinked in surprise. "How did you know I'm from Boston?" Kyle's mouth quirked in a half-smile as he took a seat at the table. "Your accent, for one thing. And those aren't Wyoming territory clothes, even if they are practical enough for travel. I'm here to claim my uncle's property," Madeline explained as Mrs. Benson set plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before them. "Uncle Henry died last month, and I'm his only living relative. His solicitor wrote that he owned a small store in Willow Creek." Kyle's expression sharpened with interest. "Henry Jones was your uncle? I knew him well, honest businessman, fair to everyone. The whole town mourned when he passed. That influenza took too many good folks last winter. I never met him." Madeline admitted. There was some falling out between him and my father years ago, before I was born. I only knew of him through occasional correspondence. Mrs. Benson joined them at the table with her own plate. So you've come all this way to see about the store? Do you plan to sell it? I'm not sure yet, Madeline answered honestly. I need to assess the situation first. My life in Boston. She trailed off, unsure how to explain that there was little left for her there. After her parents' deaths from consumption 2 years earlier, she had been living on the fringes of society, working as a governess for increasingly intolerable employers. Kyle seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. Once the roads dry out a bit, I can take you into Willow Creek. Should be safe to travel by tomorrow morning. I'd appreciate that, Madeline said gratefully. I should check on my belongings too. I had to abandon my trunk at the stagecoach station when I hired a wagon to bring me closer to town. The driver refused to continue when the storm began, and let me off with just my small bag and the lantern. Kyle's jaw tightened. Who was this driver? Leaving a woman alone in such conditions is inexcusable. His name was Silas, I believe. An older man with a gray beard. Silas Tanner. Kyle and Mrs. Benson said simultaneously, exchanging knowing looks. He has a reputation for being unreliable when he's been drinking, Kyle explained. I'll have a word with him when we get to town. After breakfast, Kyle excused himself to attend to his ranch duties, leaving Madeline with Mrs. Benson, who proved to be delightful company. The older woman had come west 20 years earlier with her husband, who had worked as Kyle's father's foreman until his death 5 years ago. Kyle insisted I stay on, Mrs. Benson explained as she showed Madeline around the house. Said he'd burn the place down trying to cook for himself. After Mr. Ironwood passed away 2 years ago, Kyle took over everything. He's done a fine job, too, despite being only 28. The ranch seems prosperous, Madeline observed, looking out the window at the well-maintained buildings and healthy cattle. It is now, Mrs. Benson agreed. But Kyle had to fight for it. The bank tried to foreclose after his father died with debts. Kyle worked himself half to death for a year, taking odd jobs in town while still running the ranch, to pay everything off. Throughout the day, Madeline found her thoughts returning to the young rancher. There was something compelling about him beyond his obvious physical appeal, a quiet strength and integrity that reminded her of the heroes in the novels she'd devoured as a younger woman. That evening, Kyle returned for dinner, and the three of them enjoyed a pleasant meal together. Afterward, he asked if Madeline would like to see the ranch by moonlight, as the storm had cleared, leaving a brilliantly starry sky. With Mrs. Benson's smiling approval, Madeline accepted, wrapping herself in a shawl borrowed from the housekeeper. Outside, the night air was crisp and clean, the vast Wyoming sky strewn with more stars than Madeline had ever seen in Boston. It's beautiful, she breathed, her head tilted back to take in the celestial display. It is, Kyle agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the sky. He cleared his throat. Would you like to see the new foals? They were born last week. They walked to the smaller corral near the barn, where several maras stood protectively near their gangly offspring. Kyle leaned on the fence rail, pointing out each of the foals and relating their lineage with obvious pride. You love this life, don't you? Madeline asked, watching his animated expression. Kyle nodded. I can't imagine doing anything else. The work is hard, and the winters can be brutal, but there's a freedom out here you can't find in cities. He paused, giving her a considering look. What about you? Will you miss Boston if you decide to stay in Willow Creek? The question caught Madeline off guard. She hadn't allowed herself to seriously consider staying permanently. I don't know, she answered honestly. There's not much left for me in Boston, but I'm not sure I'm cut out for frontier life either. Don't underestimate yourself, Kyle said quietly. You survived being lost in one of the worst storms we've had this year. That shows character. His confidence in her, barely 24 hours after meeting her, was both bewildering and strangely touching. They continued their tour of the ranch, Kyle pointing out features of the landscape visible in the moonlight, and telling stories about the area's history. By the time they returned to the house, Madeline felt more relaxed in Kyle's company, almost as if they were old friends rather than new acquaintances. At the foot of the stairs, he bid her good night with a slight bow that seemed both old-fashioned and entirely sincere. "We'll head to town after breakfast tomorrow, if that suits you," he said. "That would be perfect. Thank you again for everything, Mr. Ironwood. Kyle, please," he corrected with a warm smile. "I think pulling someone from a storm earns us first-name privileges, don't you?" "Kyle," she agreed, returning his smile. "And I'm Madeline." The next morning dawned clear and mild, perfect for travel. After a hearty breakfast, Kyle brought around a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. Mrs. Benson provided them with a basket of food for the journey, fussing over Madeline like a mother hen. "You come back and visit us, dear, whether you stay in Willow Creek or not," the housekeeper insisted as she embraced Madeline. "I will," Madeline promised, surprised by how genuinely she meant it. The journey to Willow Creek took most of the morning. As they traveled, Kyle pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area's history, from Native American legends to tales of the first settlers. Madeline found herself captivated not just by the stories but by the storyteller himself. Willow Creek proved to be larger than Madeline had anticipated, a bustling town with a main street lined with businesses, including her uncle's general store, Jones Mercantile, prominently located near the center of town. Kyle helped her down from the wagon in front of the store, which bore a small sign in the window announcing it was temporarily closed due to proprietors passing. "Your uncle lived in the rooms above the store," Kyle explained as he retrieved Madeline's small bag from the wagon. "Most of the merchants in town do the same." Before they could enter, a portly man in a suit hurried across the street toward them, his face breaking into a smile of recognition. "Miss Jones! We've been expecting you. I'm Arthur Wells, your uncle's solicitor." Introductions were made, and Mr. Wells produced the key to the store. "Everything is just as Henry left it. He was very specific in his will that the business should go to you with no encumbrances." As they entered the store, Madeline was struck by its orderliness and the quality of the merchandise. It was well stocked with everything from dry goods to tools, clothing to medicines. "Your uncle ran a fine establishment," Mr. Wells said proudly. "He served everyone fairly, from the townspeople to the ranchers to the Native Americans from the reservation to the north. He was one of the few merchants who would trade honestly with them." The rooms above the store were similarly well maintained, a small but comfortable living area with a kitchen, parlor, and 2 bedrooms. Uncle Henry's personal effects had been packed away in trunks, leaving the space ready for a new occupant. "I'll leave you to get settled," Mr. Wells said. "I have the financial records at my office whenever you're ready to review them. And the mayor would like to meet you at your convenience." After the solicitor left, Kyle helped bring in Madeline's recovered trunk, which had indeed been waiting at the stagecoach station. "What do you think?" he asked as she surveyed her new property. "It's overwhelming," Madeline admitted. "I know nothing about running a store. Your uncle's assistant, Martha Wilkins, has been keeping an eye on things. She's worked here for years and knows the business inside and out. I'm sure she'd be willing to continue." Madeline nodded, grateful for this information. "Would you know where I might find her?" "She lives just down the street with her daughter. I can introduce you if you'd like." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as Madeline settled into Willow Creek. Martha Wilkins proved to be a godsend, a capable woman in her 50s who knew every aspect of the store's operations and seemed genuinely pleased that Henry Jones's niece had come to claim her inheritance. "Your uncle spoke of you often," Martha told her as they went through the store's inventory. "He regretted the quarrel with your father that kept them apart." Kyle visited daily, sometimes helping with heavier tasks around the store, other times simply stopping by to check on Madeline's progress. She found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. A week after her arrival in Willow Creek, Kyle invited her to Sunday dinner at his ranch. "Mrs. Benson is asking after you," he explained. "And I thought you might enjoy a break from town." Madeline accepted happily, and the outing proved to be delightful. Mrs. Benson had prepared a feast, and afterward Kyle showed Madeline more of the ranch, including a beautiful overlook where the entire valley spread before them like a painting. "I could look at this view forever," Madeline said softly, the late afternoon sun bathing everything in golden light. "I feel the same way," Kyle replied, his eyes on her profile. When she turned to meet his gaze, the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, but instead, he offered his arm to lead her back to the house. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Madeline threw herself into learning the business, reopening the store with Martha's help. Kyle's visits became a regular part of her life, each one deepening the connection between them. Spring blossomed into early summer, and with it, Madeline's feelings for Kyle grew from attraction to something deeper and more profound. She found herself looking for him in every group that entered the store, her heart leaping when she spotted his tall figure. One evening in late June, Kyle invited her to the town's midsummer dance. "It's nothing fancy like the balls you probably attended in Boston," he warned. "Just fiddle music and simple dances in the town hall, followed by a picnic supper." "It sounds wonderful," Madeline assured him. "Though I should warn you, I'm not very accomplished at dancing." Kyle's smile warmed his entire face. "Neither am I. We can stumble through together." The night of the dance arrived, and Madeline wore her best dress, a blue muslin that Martha had helped her alter to better suit the current frontier fashions. When Kyle arrived to escort her, his appreciative gaze made her blush. "You look beautiful, Madeline," he said simply. The town hall was decorated with wild flowers and paper lanterns, creating a festive atmosphere despite the rustic surroundings. Madeline was introduced to what seemed like the entire population of Willow Creek, everyone curious about Henry Jones's niece from Boston. When the music began, Kyle led her onto the dance floor. Despite their mutual claims of inexperience, they moved well together, Kyle's hand warm and steady at her waist. As the evening progressed, Madeline found herself laughing more than she had in years, thoroughly enjoying the lively dances and friendly company. During a break in the music, Kyle suggested they step outside for some fresh air. The night was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. They walked a short distance from the hall, the music fading to a pleasant background melody. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Kyle asked, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Very much," Madeline replied truthfully. "Everyone has been so welcoming. They can see what I see, that you belong here." Kyle stopped walking, turning to face her. "Madeline, I know you've only been here a short time, but I can't imagine Willow Creek without you now. I can't imagine my life without you." Madeline's heart thundered in her chest. "Kyle, I'm not asking for any promises yet," he continued quickly. "I know you're still figuring out your future. But I wanted you to know that whatever you decide about the store, about staying in Willow Creek, I care for you deeply." The sincerity in his voice moved her profoundly. This was nothing like the calculated courtship she'd observed in Boston, where marriages were often arranged based on financial and social considerations. This was something real and honest. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "More than I thought possible in such a short time." Kyle's face broke into a radiant smile. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down until his lips met hers in a gentle kiss. Madeline had been kissed before, awkward pecks from overeager suitors at chaperone gatherings, but this was entirely different, a connection that seemed to reach her very soul. When they parted, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the night I found you in the storm. Why did you wait so long?" Madeline teased, feeling lightheaded with happiness. "I didn't want to frighten you away," he admitted. "You're like a wild deer, sometimes beautiful but ready to bolt at the first sudden movement." The comparison made her laugh, even as she recognized its accuracy. "I've spent most of my life being cautious," she acknowledged. "But I'm finding that some risks are worth taking." They returned to the dance hand in hand, both aware that something significant had shifted between them. For the remainder of the evening, they were rarely apart, drawing knowing smiles from the townspeople who had been watching their courtship unfold over the past weeks. As summer progressed into fall, Madeline became increasingly certain that her future lay in Willow Creek. The store was thriving under her management, with Martha's continued guidance. She had made friends among the townspeople and even begun teaching reading classes for children in the evenings, utilizing the education she'd once employed as a governess. Her relationship with Kyle deepened with each passing day. He courted her properly, with flowers and small gifts, Sunday dinners at his ranch, and rides through the spectacular Wyoming landscape. Mrs. Benson, clearly delighted by the match, took every opportunity to sing Kyle's praises and drop hints about what a fine mistress Madeline would make for the Ironwood Ranch. In late September, as the aspen trees turned to gold against the mountains, Kyle invited Madeline for a special ride to his favorite spot on the ranch, a secluded meadow beside a small lake, surrounded by trees ablaze with autumn colors. They picnicked by the water's edge, talking easily about everything and nothing. As the afternoon waned, Kyle suddenly grew serious, taking both of Madeline's hands in his. "When I found you that night in the storm, I had no idea how completely you would change my life," he began. "You've brought light and joy to days I once thought would only be filled with work and duty." Madeline felt tears welling in her eyes at the emotion in his voice. "You've changed my life too," she whispered. "You showed me what it means to truly belong somewhere, to someone." Kyle reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment," he admitted with a nervous smile. "My mother's ring. My father gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for the woman who captured my heart as completely as my mother captured his." Opening the box, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. "Madeline Jones, will you marry me? Will you make the Ironwood Ranch your home, and me the happiest man in Wyoming territory?" "Yes," Madeline answered without hesitation, her heart too full for elaborate speeches. "Yes, Kyle, I will marry you." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Kyle's kiss was full of promise and passion, a pledge of the life they would build together. They married on the first day of November, with the entire town of Willow Creek in attendance. The ceremony took place in the small church, followed by a reception at the Ironwood Ranch. Madeline wore a cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her make, with lace from her mother's wedding gown incorporated into the bodice. As they exchanged vows, Madeline thought back to that stormy night when her lantern had gone out, leaving her lost and afraid. How strange that what had seemed like the worst moment of her journey had actually been the beginning of the best part of her life. The wedding celebrations lasted well into the night, with dancing and feasting and heartfelt toasts from friends who had become like family. When the last guests had departed, Kyle led his bride up to the master bedroom, now redecorated with touches of Madeline's personality blended with the ranch's existing character. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ironwood," he murmured, gathering her into his arms. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by mid-November. Madeline had arranged for Martha to take over management of the store temporarily, allowing the newlyweds time to settle into their life together. The cold months passed in a blissful cocoon of domesticity and deepening love, as they learned each other's habits and histories. Madeline told Kyle about her childhood in Boston, the loss of her parents, and her years as an increasingly discontented governess. Kyle shared stories of growing up on the ranch, his time at school in Denver, and his struggle to save his inheritance after his father's death. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire in the ranch house parlor, sometimes reading aloud to each other, other times simply enjoying the comfortable silence between them. Madeline had never known such contentment, such a sense of rightness in her place in the world. When spring arrived, bringing new calves and colts to the ranch and a rush of activity, Madeline had news of her own to share. On a morning ride to their special meadow, now carpeted with wildflowers, she told Kyle that she was expecting their first child. His joy was boundless, lifting her from her horse to spin her around before setting her down with exaggerated care, suddenly concerned about her condition. Madeline laughed at his protective instincts, even as she cherished the love behind them. "Do you ever regret it?" Kyle asked later, as they lay in the meadow grass, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "Coming west? Staying in Willow Creek instead of returning to civilization?" Madeline considered the question seriously, knowing Kyle deserved an honest answer. "Not for a moment," she replied finally. "Boston never felt like home the way this place does. The way you do." Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born on a crisp December morning, with Mrs. Benson serving as midwife. She had Kyle's blue eyes and Madeline's auburn hair, a perfect blend of her parents. As Madeline held her newborn daughter, with Kyle's arm around them both, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a lost, frightened woman crying in a storm to the beloved wife of a respected rancher, and now a mother her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. All because a lantern went out, and a kind cowboy found her in the darkness. "What are you thinking about?" Kyle asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That night in the storm," Madeline admitted. "When you said I wasn't lost anymore." Kyle smiled, his eyes filled with love as he looked at his wife and daughter. "I was right, wasn't I? You found your way home." "No," Madeline corrected gently. "We found it together." Outside, snow began to fall, the first flakes of what promised to be another Wyoming winter. Inside the warm ranch house, the Ironwood family remained wrapped in the glow of their happiness, as secure and bright as the lantern light that now illuminated their way forward, together.